It's the week ending Saturday the 21st of October, and this is the Week Unwrapped. In the past 7 days, we've seen a tropical storm battering Ireland, hopes of Brexit transition talks finally beginning, being dashed by the EU, and the Spanish government triggering direct rule of Catalonia as their deadline expires. But we're here to bring you some of the stories that passed under the radar this week. Big news, not making headlines right now, but with repercussions for all our lives. I'm Olly Mann. Let's unwrap the week. And joining me from the week's digital team are Cameron Tait, Arion McNicoll and Kari Wilkin. And starting the show this week, it is Kari. What do you think this week will be remembered for?
What's worse than President Trump?
Mike Pence.
Carl, with your take on it, was justice served in the case of Kelly Flynn? Is adultery no longer a big deal in Indiana and in America? I'd just love to know your thoughts, because I, for one, believe that the seventh commandment, contained in the 10 commandments, is still a big deal. It's the most important promise you'll ever make. And holding people accountable to those promises and holding people accountable to respecting the promises that other people make, to me, what could possibly be a bigger deal?
Vice President Mike Pence, in his former life as a talk radio host back in 1997. Kari, why are we talking about this?
This week, Trump has allegedly been joking that during a White House conversation about gay rights, that Pence wants to hang all gays. And this was reported in an article in the New Yorker magazine, which was a profile of Pence, which revealed that he's possibly even worse than Trump, dare I say it.
Okay, so the thing that links the clip we were just listening to and, you know, this supposed joke of Trump's that Pence wants to hang all gay people is that suddenly people are turning their attention through archive footage and current analysis to what is the man who could replace Trump?
Well, exactly. And it's,
were Trump to be impeached?
It's starting to look like a real possibility. You know, Trump is at danger of being impeached over the whole Russia scandal. He's failed to pass any major legislation, really. So Republicans clearly want to see the back of him as well. Whereas Pence can effectively further the Republican rights agenda in Congress. Okay, so when you say even worse, I mean, obviously that's from a liberal perspective. Yeah,
a lot of people
course,
like Trump and Pence in the States. But if you listen to just his passion and his eloquence, actually, even in that clip, it's still at least a more mainstream way of conversing than Trump.
It is, but I think in that sense, Trump's saving grace is that he doesn't really believe in anything except Trump, whereas with Pence, what he does believe in is so scary. This is the man, he's against equal rights for gay people. When he was governor of Indiana, he signed an act that effectively legalized discrimination against LGBT people. He said that same-sex marriage would result in a societal collapse, didn't exactly say how. He supports the criminalization of abortion, even in cases of fetal abnormality. He believes that global warming is a myth.
I think the thing for me that makes this whole debate over who's more extreme out of Trump or Pence a bit peculiar is that, that they're both pretty far out there. And in fact, I think there is this sort of feeling that because of his polish or something about him being a more acceptable...
He's more calculating.
Yeah, like recognisable politician, people feel like he'd make a better president. But I don't buy that Trump's not achieving stuff. Yes, he's not getting legislation through, but he's still managing to make all sorts of inroads into exactly the same policy areas as Pence.
But there's also speculation that Pence actually has the greatest influence within the White House at the moment, you know, that he is the driving factor behind those changes. He's said to have more influence than, you know, Steve Bannon did, than Trump's son-in-law does.
But hold on, he is the vice president. He has been elected. I mean, he should actually. It's the right order of things, isn't it, Cameron, that the vice president should have more power than someone's son-in-law?
Yes, exactly. That's what I was thinking. But I was also thinking from maybe in the White House that Pence may have more influence than Trump. But I believe that Trump still has the stranglehold of the American people because he is the straight-talking, gets his point across so easily. Whereas I think that Pence almost comes across as someone from a bygone era, especially with these views.
I think that's right. And I think that a lot of people actually flipped bizarrely from having voted for Obama in one election and voting for Trump in the following election. And the reason that they did that is because they're after something that was new, and Pence wouldn't have represented something that was terribly new. He would have been an establishment candidate.
And yet he's still being viewed as, by many Republicans, as the most likely nominee for the next election. They clearly think he's a viable
In
candidate.
2020 or 2024?
Either.
Yeah, depends how long Trump sticks around.
And yet, I mean, his experience as a talk radio host, and we only just had a little clip of it there, but obviously what he was kind of putting his finger on then, even then in the 90s, was that Republican voters even weren't just after Republican policies of the type that you describe, even though he was kind of Tea Party extreme, I guess. They're also after kind of anti-establishment presentation. So he does get that. He maybe helped Trump understand that.
Yeah, and he's got some very powerful backers. The Koch brothers, who are two billionaire brothers they're infamous for bankrolling GOP campaigns. He was a keynote speaker at their policy and planning strategy retreat in New York last week, and basically they're all about pushing an anti-tax, anti-regulatory agenda. And he's been key in pushing through these reforms and acts for them. He helped boost the no climate tax that was pledged by their organisation, Americans for Prosperity. He is pushing their agenda, and he's doing it effectively, and they in turn are backing him up with some very powerful support.
But I think there's this idea that we're going to be better off with Pence as president than with Trump among some people.
Well, because a lot of people just think anyone but Trump.
Well, yeah, and also maybe one of the things that you would immediately eliminate is the threat of thermonuclear war, and I think we can all agree that that's
a bonus.
that's possibly a good thing. And I think that maybe is the one area where, particularly if you're saying Pence is working behind the scenes and he's already de facto driving the Trump-Pence agenda, then I think stability is the one area that you could say you'd get an advantage out of having Pence as president rather than Trump. I don't think that things would change massively. I think that...
I think it would. I think Trump puts the spanner into so many works, with these ridiculous Twitter posts and offending pretty much every leader around the world. Pence has got that ability to be diplomatic, to present things in a more rational appearing way.
Yeah, it's funny, isn't it? It's almost as if Trump's views, actually, the man himself, if you were to speak to him as, essentially from his roots as a metropolitan New Yorker, exactly, are probably far less extreme and far more mainstream. He supported Hillary in the past and all the rest of it, but he dresses it up as the Tea Party, and Pence is the opposite. Yeah. He's pure Tea Party who can dress it up as mild-mannered, mainstream.
He makes it all seem rational.
Yeah.
But I think that the Republican Party's problems go deeper than just Trump and Pence, and part of what's going on there is, as you say, the Tea Party has so hijacked the party that it's now completely stuck, and its inability to legislate is partly to do with Trump, yes, but it's also the fact that there's such massive division even within the GOP that on an issue like trying to repeal and replace Obamacare, on the one hand, you had these, crazy people wanting to just smash it to bits. Other people, and then on the sort of more liberal end, you had the moderates wanting to replace aspects of it and keep other parts. So even within the House itself, they were unable to reach any sort of agreement between themselves on how to move legislation forward.
So is that some of that not down to poor leadership? Don't they need a leader who's going to pull them all together? Whereas Trump, certainly, that's not his talent.
I think they do, but if you've got your Mitch McConnells and Paul Ryans there ostensibly, notionally being the sort of leader that the GOP needs, but they're not able to wrangle this motley crew together.
Cameron.
Because I think they stand for two very different things. I think if you look at it, Trump is very much focused on American industry and making everything about building up America as a superpower, whereas with Pence, we're looking at someone who's returning back to those Christian morals. And I think that those two really don't cross over with each other. Both of them are right-wing, both of them can be kind of deep within the Republicans, but they are so extreme either way that there's always going to be a headache.
But actually, isn't that the case with all mainstream political parties in all of the West at the moment? It's the same here, isn't it, where within the Labour Party you effectively have two Labour parties, Corbynistas and Blairites, and in the Tory Party you have Brexiters and non-Brexiters. So it is in the US that even within the Republican Party you have centrists and you have Tea Partyists.
But that's, with Pence as a clear figurehead, at least he could get his side pushed forward.
Well, exactly, but maybe that's what people actually need. That's why, in a way, he won is you just need someone who'll say anything to appeal to everyone at some point.
But you don't necessarily want them ruling one of the biggest countries in the world.
But that's the situation we're in, isn't it? There's no, even within the Democrats, you had a movement towards Bernie Sanders. So it's almost impossible to find someone who can speak for everyone.
Yeah, of course, you're never going to get that. But do you want Pence speaking for America? I think is a very worrying point.
And I think that is a really good question. It's also interesting to return to the clip that we just heard and the sheer hypocrisy of Pence being willing to stand up next to the man who, if he's known for anything, it's breaking the seventh commandment.
Yeah.
Cameron, you're next. What do you think this week's going to be remembered for?
We need to dig into the latest currency fad.
It is true that the way Bitcoin is constructed, it's meant to be finite. It's meant to be harder and harder to mint coins as there are more and more out there. And so the scarcity value is an important part of the Bitcoin plan and has been from the very beginning. But I think, for people in the Bitcoin community, they see all this investment, they see all this excitement, they know all these deals, they can't believe their parents don't understand what they're doing. So when they see the price surge, I think it's seen as a validation of what they've all been working on.
Corey Johnson there of Bloomberg News talking about Bitcoin, Cameron.
Bitcoin.
You brought us Bitcoin again. Why?
I've brought you Bitcoin because this week there has been some news about people essentially going to extreme ways to get their hands on virtual currencies. So what's in the news is, and it's been happening over the past month, I would say, of hackers taking control of websites and using people's computers to crack codes to unlock virtual currencies. Now, in the past, this has usually happened on some quite dodgy websites, such as the illegal downloading site Pirate Bay. But this week, it's happened to a much more credible source called PolitiFact, which is essentially a fact-checking news source.
Okay, so ordinary users of PolitiFact were what? Unintentionally what?
So
distributing Bitcoins?
Yes, so if you were to go onto PolitiFact and you were going to be searching through their columns, the code that was basically hacked onto this site would be digging into the performance of your computer and using your PC to mine and crack codes to unlock cryptocurrencies without you realizing.
Okay, and that's new because what?
It's a new phenomenon because obviously with the rise of Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, the normal way of getting them is simply buying them. You go and invest in them.
People volunteering their computers to become mining machines. Yeah.
But as in this case with the clip, as they were saying, it's becoming harder and harder to find them because there's a finite amount of how many there are. People are digging in and they're mining them and finding as many ways as they can to get hold of these very valuable coins.
Okay, one final question before we open this to the floor, Cameron, and forgive me for my bluntness. So what?
So it raises a real ethical problem of whether we should hack into people's computers, bearing in mind they won't know, to mine cryptocurrencies.
I think the thing that struck me as interesting about this story was how blasé people were after having heard it. It seemed like this is an issue, that parasitic code can be put on the computer that you're using without your say-so, and someone can take over your computer and do with it as they please. It so happens that it's quite a technical thing that they're doing with it, but there just seemed to be this sort of
but they can't because it's illegal.
Shrug.
They can't legally do it. They can only illegally do it.
Oh, no, I know.
So
but people
the
didn't
laws are
seem
there to stop it happening.
concerned that this was happening. And it kind of, for me, it ties in with a sort of broad lack of concern for hacking
that sense that
generally.
Big Brother's watching, basically there is no such thing as private information anymore, and you've just got to hope that nothing you do particularly attracts attention.
Exactly. Earlier in the week, there was this story about every Wi-Fi in the world being compromised. And again, it was like there was no fallout, no sort of broad concern about it, even though that means that someone sitting by your house could hack into your Wi-Fi and potentially monitor what you're doing with your computer at any time.
But it's because I don't think people fully understand what's going on, because it is such a complicated subject. People will look at it and go, oh, I've got no idea what this is about, cryptocurrencies, whatever. But it is something that we should be very concerned about, because...
But you would think that word hacking would raise alarm bells.
Well, because hacking in the past has been associated... You've got keywords beyond hacking, because hacking is just... It's in headlines every week, almost every day. But when it's something like bank hacking or personal detail hacking, they're hacking to get my passwords or email accounts. I think even that is kind of... People are starting to care less about it because it just happens so frequently. But when it's people are hacking into your computers to mine cryptocurrencies, I think it's a bit... It doesn't really resonate.
It depends on the actual services that people are using, doesn't it? I mean, if this is actually about convenience, as Arion was suggesting, essentially, so long as people can use their computers, they don't really care what's going on.
So someone hacks into my computer to do this. So what effect does it have on me?
What effect does it have?
Well, so what it does is it essentially slows your computer down. So if you go onto it, it takes a section of your computer's brain power to go and mine for this currency. And at first, you might not notice it, but that could really depend on the computer that you're using. If you're using a very high-end computer, it might make no difference whatsoever. But if you're using one that, let's say, is very much internet-focused and doesn't have a very big processor, you could just completely destroy the performance of your computer trying to get somebody else money.
But when your computer slows down to that point, wouldn't most people just Google, why is my computer so slow? And it would say, well, wipe it and restart it, and that sort of deals with it.
Yeah, but if you do that, then will they know to go back to that source? Because there's nothing on these sources to say they're being hacked into. I've got no idea if I go into a website and it's using my computer data. So if I typed in and said, why is my computer slow? You can have pages and pages of reasons as to why that is. And it's very unlikely they'll say cryptocurrency mining.
There was a report this week, wasn't there, about 500 million PCs are used every month for stealth cryptocurrency mining alone. So clearly, millions and millions of computers are being used in this way every month, and most of us don't notice. So
it's not illegal. So it's not illegal.
It's not illegal.
It's not illegal, no.
It must be illegal to put a code on
cryptocurrency
someone
mining,
else's
isn't
news
it?
site. That must be illegal.
Yes, that's illegal. So if you were to put code onto somebody else's website,
Which is what they've been doing.
some of them have been doing.
Well, PolitiFact didn't do it, so someone did
PolitiFact,
it.
yeah, so that's
Someone
illegal.
did something illegal.
Someone did something illegal, and that has been happening to not just PolitiFact, but it's also happened to charity websites in the UK and also school websites. But there are websites out there that are doing it legally. Not all of them are saying that they're doing it, but it's not illegal.
But if it's a way of them being able to get rid of like annoying banner adverts, maybe it's a trade-off worth making.
Yes, so some are saying, oh, we'll get rid of adverts if we can go and do it for you. But the amount of processing power that an advert will do will be nothing in comparison to what sucking it out for a cryptocurrency would
Isn't
be.
it about the irritation of just having these banner adverts popping up?
I'd take that trade-off.
But it's transferring the irritation, is it not? You've got something in your way, or you've got something that is slowing your computer down. I would rather have an advert than my computer being an absolute slug.
I suppose it depends how much it slows down your computer, doesn't it?
Cameron, are you part of what that chap from Bloomberg would have called the Bitcoin community?
It interests me.
Elaborate.
Well, I think that there is money to be made if you put your mind to it.
Right. And the point that I made last time we discussed this, the reason I haven't invested in Bitcoin is because I kind of think, well, when it's ready for that, PayPal will launch a product enabling me to do that. Apple will let me do that. They haven't. There isn't an HSBC Bitcoin portal. So therefore, there must be something a bit dodgy about it because banks like to make money.
But
now, this seems to me to suggest that people involved in Bitcoin are a bit dodgy.
Well,
But don't all innovations look like that to begin with? You go, well, it's not established, therefore I don't want to do it. But it's the people who take the risk and make that
but
plunge
we've just
that make the
established that
money.
people who are taking that risk are involved in illegal activity at the
Well,
moment.
there is that.
but there are also kind of, if you want, on that tangent, there are companies, big companies that are investing in cryptocurrencies, not just Bitcoin. You have got the likes of Santander that is buying into it. Google Labs are also buying into it as well. So it's not they're bringing out their own version, they're investing in it. But again, just with the mining sense, that's where you see the dodgier side, where people are going to extremes. Individuals are going to extremes to go and get their hands on these currencies. The legitimate way of doing it is going out and buying it.
Is this, to put the other perspective on it, sort of, I guess, somewhat empowering for people that they can take on the government, take on banks with normal people's computers?
Yeah, I guess so, because essentially you're in control of basically generating either your own money or somebody else's money. But that's from the perspective of Bitcoin. There are also other positive ways that you can do mining, where you can essentially put fundraising into your own hands. So I believe that there are universities that are doing it as well, of where you can...
Doing it, yeah.
Dozens of universities where you can sign up and say, you can use my computer to mine for virtual currencies that will go and help charities.
But also...
Mining, just using the computer power for information.
Yeah, I think that there's a bunch of organizations that are allowing users to hand over their PC's spare computing power to benefit projects that require a massive amount of computing power, like, say, SETI does it, searching for alien intelligence.
There are universities doing it for
looking
research into cancer cures, that sort of thing.
Yeah,
It doesn't
exactly.
have to be about money.
So handing over your computer power can actually be a positive thing.
Exactly. You're essentially getting a whole warehouse of computers from your desk at home.
We'll end on that positive point, I think. Arion, you're next. What do you think this week will be remembered for?
I think this will be remembered as the week we saw the funny side of a genocidal tyrant.
Stalin's dead. He's dead.
Stalin is dead!
Oh my God. Our general secretary is lying in a puddle of indignity.
He's feeling unwell, clearly.
I want to make a speech at my father's funeral.
No problem.
Technically, yes, but practically.
When I said no problem, what I meant was no problem.
Jeffrey Tambor and the cast of The Death of Stalin opening this week in the UK. Arion, the last time you brought us a story about a film, it was because you'd interviewed Al Gore. Have you interviewed Stalin for the week online? Is that what you're going to promote?
Now that would be a scoop.
What is the story here?
So the story is this new film opens and there are rumblings from Russia of discontent about the content of the film and whether it's tasteful to make a film like this and whether, in fact, we should leave well alone and not try to find slapstick out of someone who possibly killed up to 20 million people.
And no one's really that surprised, surely, about that controversy. I mean, of all the things that are predictable about making a farce about the death of Stalin, you'd imagine the reaction in Russia would be one of the things you'd expect to be controversial.
I suppose so. My question is, where is that outrage coming from? And so far, the people that at least I managed to find were a Russian Communist Party spokesman, Alexander Yashchenko, describing the film as abominable filth, and then various other party people also making a similar point about the fact that, this is in poor taste, and one of them said it's another form of psychological warfare against the Russian people that was designed to discredit not just Stalin, but all of the country's leaders.
Although, don't you think that a lot of people in the West will be surprised to learn just how popular Stalin still is in Russia?
I think so. And I think there is a question about how far the criticisms go, particularly given, as you say, there is this sort of resuscitation of his reputation that's going on. And in a recent poll that I saw, 40% of people thought that Stalin had done a pretty good job and was a fairly admirable kind of chap, and only 27% thought he was a bit wicked.
Well, he won a poll, didn't he, in June for the greatest person of all nations in all eras, and they decided that was Stalin.
That's pretty comprehensive.
Could we not consider this movie as perhaps doing some good in kind of telling people, kind of removing those rose-tinted glasses and going, look, he really was quite a bad guy. And we actually, one of the best ways of showing that is to take the mick out of him.
To undermine someone, laugh at them. There's nothing more effective than that.
It's a bit like Quentin Tarantino's film Inglourious Bastards, which is, it's not very historically accurate, but it is essentially just...
Yeah. Really?
It's basically just a bunch of Brits and Americans going out to go and, as they say, shoot some Nazis. And that's what they go and do. They go and take down Hitler in a very unhistorical way, and it's basically going and hunting down the bad guy.
I think there is something in that, and I think that's the point of satire, if it's done well, that you can find a way to...
That's the point, isn't it? Doing it well.
Yeah, yes, and I think that the proof will be in the pudding on this one, and so far it's getting good reviews, at least from our perspective. I think that in the West, it's easy to say, well, everything's fair game and it's okay to criticize whatever. But I can imagine it's a little bit closer to the bone if your family was directly affected by Stalin's regime. And maybe that's where there is a question of taste and whether we do have to be cautious about taking on just any subject matter and regarding it as ripe for comedy.
I mean, but when it's so clearly a comedy, though, I mean, and so clearly a satire as well. I mean, I think there was actually a danger, very small danger, but there was a danger that stupid people would watch Inglourious Bastards and think that might have been something like what happened.
It wouldn't surprise me if some people thought that's what happened.
Because they might not understand that Quentin Tarantino is, channeling blaxploitation as he approaches the subject of the death of Hitler, which didn't happen. However, with the death of Stalin, I mean, it's so obviously a comic treatment of the facts that even someone who didn't know anything about what happened in Russia would see that these are actors with British accents playing absurd characters. So it's going to be only loosely based around what happened.
I think so. And actually also, for me at least, there's enough potential for humour in what happened immediately after his death. Probably not a good 20 or 30 years of the rest of his reign, but that period after he died and the circumstances in which he died and the stumblings of a lot of powerful people trying to work out how to deal with this situation, how to move the state forward. I mean, I think there's, from what I understand of the actual history, there's humour in it.
Kari.
It's amazing. I've only seen a couple of reviews, but both, The Guardian, for instance, said, it's great entertainment, but bad history. It's like, I think you're missing the point there.
Right. Yeah, that actually...
It's not about necessarily portraying exactly what happened. It's just making a mockery of this man.
Okay, so this is sort of Western style of humour applied to Eastern politics. I think that's where this tension's come from, right? But actually, in a way, that's quite refreshing that it's still happening, isn't it? That people finance this movie because, and we've talked before on this show about how Hollywood studios now are tailoring their products for international markets, making sure there are Chinese people in the cast and all this kind of thing. This is the opposite of that.
And particularly given that this sort of film is very unlikely to be made in Russia at the moment.
I saw an interview with Armando Iannucci, the writer and director, and Michael Palin, who stars in the film, and they were talking about how hard it was to get this picture off the ground, and the interviewer asked Michael Palin whether he thought that he'd be able to have made The Life of Brian today, and Michael Palin said he thought it would actually be quite hard because actually the subject matter as it was pretty contentious, being about the life of Jesus. And he felt that in an age of social media criticism being so front and centre, it would be quite hard to get that project off the ground. So, yeah, it's...
it comes into this wider issue of free speech that's coming out more and more, with the universities in America refusing to have certain speakers, of that balance between what is offensive to people, but ultimately, if you... The other argument, if you don't want to hear it, don't listen.
Sort of. But I mean, I heard Armando Iannucci giving a different interview about a year ago before he was on the publicity trail for this film, in which he admitted, basically, that you can get away with it with Stalin. For whatever reason, he doesn't have the same traction in the West as Hitler. You still couldn't do this about Hitler. And I think we all know that, don't we? We know you can do the Book of Mormon, but you can't do the Book of Muhammad. We know that. There are areas in which people, however fearless they seem, just won't go because they're frightened.
Well, they did The Producers, which was...
They did The Producers, but I mean...
yeah, slightly
different.
But
I take your point, and I think that the question is, why are we being sensitive to some cultures and issues more than others? And if there is the possibility that you could have an entire nation be pretty upset about this, or at least 40% of people who support Stalin's regime, then should we be listening to that sensitivity and being cautious about it?
I mean, is it a brave move actually making this film, do you think? Because it would be brave, wouldn't it, to do this? To do The Life of Muhammad would be brave, as I say, because there'd be the genuine risk of a fatwa. I mean, actually, we have seen Putin's Russia go outside the country and assassinate people. Yep. So is Armando Iannucci being brave making this, or is he just preaching to people who already find this kind of thing funny and they won't change their minds politically?
Well, I think it's also that kind of British humour that I think that we'll definitely get, and we can almost laugh it off. And I just wonder if that's going to have the same... It's going to resonate the same with others, even just outside of our country, if people are really going to get that. Whereas... it seems like quite a common thing to do now is take the mick out of previous kind of dictators. We've already had it in America with The Interview, where they've made this hilarious comedy film about Kim Jong-un.
That didn't go too well either.
That didn't go too well in North Korea at all. But I don't think we should fear not making movies like that.
And I think it's telling that actually they haven't got any proposed launch date for the death of Stalin in Russia as yet. They haven't even applied for certification. So who knows if they're...
I don't. Presumably.
Okay, favourite controversial movie? You get to choose one. What would it be? I'm going to start the ball rolling. Team America World Police.
Oh, wow, great film.
I was the right age for that.
I really wanted to add that one in. I would go with The Interview. I thought that was funny.
Which one, The Interview? You thought The Interview was funny? I think that might be the most controversial statement you've ever made on the show.
Ridiculous at first, and then I just thought there was something so stupid about it, I did find it quite funny.
Okay, Kari?
I'm going to be predictable and go with Life of Brian.
It's a goodie.
It's so brilliant.
Okay, and Arion, all the obvious options have been taken. Find a controversial film.
I actually can't think of it.
Okay, well, we'll leave Arion for a couple of weeks. He's next on the show. Tell us then. That is it from this edition of The Week Unwrapped. My thanks to Cameron Tait, Arion McNicoll and Kari Wilkin. For more from The Week, why not visit theweek.co.uk. You can also sign up there to our free email newsletter, The Weekday, or of course you can have the magazine delivered direct to your door. Just head to theweek.co.uk/subscribe. Remember as well, however you found this episode of the show, that all our past episodes of the show are available for free online. That is how podcasting works. Just search for The Week Unwrapped on your podcast app of choice. I've been Olly Mann. Our music is by Tom Morby, the producer Matt Hill at Rethink Audio. Until we meet again to unwrap next week, bye-bye.